Welcome to our podcast, Journey into the Future of Medicine. I'm your host, Bill Maggio, Chief Executive Officer of the Jacobs Institute. We are a nonprofit medical device innovation center here in Buffalo, New York. Here we talk about what is possible in the next quarter century of medicine and healthcare, based on a report we published titled The Future of Medicine. Dr. Carlos Peña, welcome to this podcast and to Buffalo, New York.
Great to be here, Bill. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to be with you today. We're so fortunate that you recently joined the Jacobs Institute as our Chief Regulatory Officer, a new role in our organization, leading the newly established Office of Regulatory Services. Your 20-plus year career has spanned federal agencies and the executive branch of our government in Washington, D.C. With your expertise, the JI looks forward to expanding and broadening the collaborative opportunities with our key partners, University of Buffalo and Kaleida Health. So, Carlos, before we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's good to be here, Bill. I recently relocated here from Washington, D.C. There, I served as the director of the Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or also known as FDA. Before my FDA director role, I was Assistant Director for Emerging Technologies in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy in the Executive Office of President Obama. I received my PhD in neuroscience from Case Western Reserve University, and I hold a master's degree in comparative physiology from the University of Connecticut.
So I have to ask you, do you miss the FDA?
I do miss it.
It's a lot different here in Buffalo than at the FDA, I would imagine. Well, I'm looking forward, and I hope that we have the opportunity to learn more about your experiences at the White House, too. I would imagine that was probably a fascinating aspect of your career, which has been remarkable up to this point. We are excited about this new development at the JI. So as you know, our Future of Medicine report explores what is possible in the next quarter century of medicine and healthcare. Interestingly, there is a chapter titled, Can the FDA Keep Up? I know you're familiar with it, that explores whether the agency is ready to accommodate anticipated innovation. We can't think of a better person to talk with about this chapter than yourself. So why don't we start by, tell us a little bit about your role at the FDA prior to joining the FDA. What did you do? What was a day in the life of Carlos Peña at the FDA?
Sure. So prior to joining the JI, I served as the director in the Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices. I was responsible for providing leadership in the development of safe and effective neurological and physical medicine devices to support FDA's mission to protect and promote public health and foster innovation. I specifically provided oversight over several cross-functional teams and was the lead contact for the agency's strategic plans and implementation efforts for neuro and physical medicine devices.
So I just have to ask, what was the coolest product you think you ever got to the FDA?
I think one of the products that comes to mind was when I first was a reviewer and I was there for just maybe a month. We got out a humanitarian device exemption for pediatric kids who had dystonia. And it was a great approval using deep brain stimulation to treat this terrible, debilitating disease.
Wow, that's got to be incredibly rewarding to be a part of that process.
It was a fantastic project to work on.
Yeah, and it really, I'm just curious, and it's probably not an answer to this, but how you guys, when you know you're doing something really special like that, do you follow it? Do you follow the press? I know you do when something bad happens, but when nothing bad happens, I mean,
Yeah, we try to follow it. Usually, as soon as we can get something too close to patients, we usually focus on the next mission that comes in.
Yeah, I would imagine. It's a pretty busy place. You also served as Assistant Director of Emerging Technologies in the White House of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, in the Executive Offices of President Obama. Tell me a little bit about that role. That's pretty fascinating.
Sure. At the White House, I served as the Assistant Director of Emerging Technologies in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the Executive Office of the President for 2 years, 2012 to 2014. My primary responsibilities included enabling emerging technologies development and federal coordination across the U.S., as well as facilitating support of various federal agencies to collaborate in these efforts. A primary focus of mine was on the Brain Initiative, aimed at revolutionizing our understanding of the human brain with an eye towards accelerating the development and application of innovative technologies to address public health needs in the U.S.
So who did you report to in that role?
So in that role, I reported to Dr. Philip Rubin, who was the lead officer at the Science and Technology Policy Office.
Did you ever have an opportunity to sit with the president?
In a big room, I did.
Okay. Great. The yell across to the table, hello, Carlos, it's good to see you.
Exactly. Yeah, we had multiple.
So what's an interesting memory that you have from working at the White House?
Yep. The most important memory that I have at the White House was understanding the power of convening, bringing people together. Great things are accomplished by people working together, and rarely is a great outcome achieved by one person alone. So, I learned the best leaders convene people coming together. Those discussions enable the potential to solve some of the most challenging of problems we face as a nation.
Let's bring things for a moment back to Buffalo. The JI is a medical innovation center focused on accelerating the development of new technologies to treat vascular diseases such as heart attack and stroke. Having an in-house regulatory expert was part of our founder, Dr. Nick Hopkins' initial vision for the organization. So help our listeners understand what attracted you to the Jacobs Institute and to Buffalo.
Great question. I was first introduced to the JI via an experiential learning program training opportunity that the JI offered to FDA staff. It enabled FDA staff to train up on the clinical engineering and patient aspects of medical product development and innovation. I was very impressed, especially with the intersection of these areas at the JI in combination with the University of Buffalo, Kaleida Health, Gates Vascular Institute, and local and regional partners in Buffalo.
And I just have to ask, as a longtime Buffalonian, how do you like Buffalo? In the winter.
In the winter, it's fantastic. I haven't seen too much snow. I eventually have to buy a shovel, but hopefully I can skip this season.
Can you share some thoughts, at least initially, how you plan to collaborate with our key partners, specifically the University of Buffalo and Kaleida Health, as well as, quite frankly, the rest of the Western New York health and med tech sectors?
Sure. Great. That's a great question. My main focus is standing up this new Office of Regulatory Services at the JI. This office will be a component of the Institute that provides a unique menu of services, including medical device strategy development, risk assessment, and enabling FDA engagement with the agency. These services, I hope, can provide the framework for collaboration that is currently already building with our key partners, especially with a focus on early feasibility study development.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect, in fact, I know you've had some good initial conversations with both the University of Buffalo and Kaleida. Would that be an accurate
Yes,
assessment?
we're also exploring how these services, this regulatory experience can help University of Buffalo in training and education programs.
Yeah, that's what a wonderful asset to have come to the university, a university that itself is really expanding in national and international prominence. Carlos, I'd like to delve a bit into your FDA expertise. I think all of our listeners might like a general overview of the FDA. Can you share with us at a 30 or 40,000 foot level what the FDA's role is?
Sure. The FDA is involved in protecting the public health by ensuring that foods are safe, ensuring that human and veterinarian drugs and vaccines and other biological products and medical devices intended for human use are safe and effective, among other responsibilities. With a focus on neuro and physical medicine, the FDA's primary goal is ensuring these products are safe and effective and that patients have access to these devices first in the world.
Let's talk for a moment about what's on everybody's mind, vaccines. When a national health crisis is at stake, like in the current times, or like we're currently dealing with COVID-19, how did the FDA adapt its efforts to advance the approval of these very important necessary treatments?
Yeah, I think the FDA has taken an approach with vaccines as it has for other products in ensuring that there is a comprehensive review and that review meets the standards as the U.S. public expects of its staff that work at the agency. So I think there's been some really good efforts that happen all the time for the products that we review at the agency.
And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this question, but you're vaccinated, I'm vaccinated. There's a lot of concern initially about some of the newer technologies. What's your personal take? I mean, I believe that they're safe, but there's still some concern out there that, one thing that might delay our efforts to get the herd immunity will be people's fear about getting the vaccine. I think we're starting to see that erode, but what's your take on just the safety of these vaccines?
Yeah, so that's a great question, especially right now. Vaccine development is certainly a hot topic. The vaccine product area is in a separate component of the FDA called the Center for Biologics and Evaluation and Research, separate from the devices. It was not an area specifically assigned to me, but I can tell you that folks took the product review of those products seriously, as all FDA staff take serious the review of medical products across the agency. And each day, folks can rest assured that FDA holds the quality standards for all products that it reviews, meeting the expectations of the public, including vaccines.
What was the atmosphere like at the FDA? Was there like a kind of a coming together of assets from multiple different skill sets to really kind of tackle this problem? Because quite frankly, I just know in our own community, we're up to almost 30% of the population here in Erie County has been vaccinated. It just seems like all of a sudden it's like a boulder rolling downhill, which is great. But I mean, what was it like at the FDA? How did you guys get this done? Get to a point where you could feel comfortable, launching these very important vaccines to the general population?
It was a challenge. I think, vaccines are important, drug therapies are important, diagnostics become important, patient protective equipment, ventilation machines. There's all these different products related to our efforts in COVID where the agency has limited resources. And so decisions have to be made on how to allocate and appropriate those resources to the product areas that have most need while you're still trying to keep the pace of technologies and other product areas moving forward. So it was a very challenging time, but I think the agency did a fantastic job so far.
Mm-hmm. So I had to ask about vaccines because, because I know people would expect me to, but getting back to kind of our area of expertise, what is the general pathway and timeline for new medical devices to be approved by the FDA?
And there are a number of regulatory pathways available to bring medical devices to the market. And the way this happens in part depends upon the degree of oversight needed, which is based in part on the risk of the device. For some of the moderate to higher risk devices that may be used, especially in the neuro or cardiac spaces, timelines can vary depending upon the risks and the potential benefits of a given device. In these situations where folks are interested in getting a product to the patient, early engagement is always useful and the best practice for clarifying the timelines needed for any given product. Having early discussions to ensure everyone is invested has the same expectations is the best first step needed to getting devices to patients.
So let's talk about how the JI fits in all this. I mean, where could the JI potentially fit into the regulatory process that you just kind of articulated for us to help get products to market faster? Because I think ultimately that's the objective, right?
Sure. I believe the JI has a unique perspective and contribution with the intersection of so many disciplines, so many resources to bring to bear on the engineering side, the clinical side, the medical side. That is all coming together in one place, which I think provides a great environment for facilitating innovation and bringing ideas to reality. Very few places exist elsewhere to do just that.
So what do you think is the biggest opportunity then to change the paradigm of how devices are tested and or say developed to get safer products to market faster?
I think that one of the areas that provides a great opportunity is the early feasibility studies activities for getting products to patients in the U.S., first in the world. EFS includes a small number of patients, study subjects, about 15 or less, involves use of device designs that may be early in development or for new intended use. That's something already on the market. And it's designed to gain initial clinical insights or proof of concept when additional non-clinical testing cannot provide the information needed to advance that technology. This is probably the fastest way for U.S. patients to test a potentially promising product and to start clinical studies that helps get the data for the FDA to make a decision for access to the U.S. marketplace. It's a great pathway.
Let's talk about, the approval process from a more of a global perspective. I know, having worked in the medical device industry, and I assume that's the same for the pharmaceutical industry, that, they're always clamoring for some sort of a single international regulatory standard, which, obviously, if there were, I would think that they would have some impact on development costs. Do you think we'll ever come a time when a global standard will exist for devices as it does in other industries, such as, manufacturing, for example?
Yeah, I think we're headed in that direction. Currently, FDA works with other countries, especially on the medical device side, in a forum called the IMDRF, or the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, which enables cooperation, collaboration across different regulatory bodies, different countries around the world. These efforts are currently underway to bring harmonization to the medical device sector. This is the place, a very good place for those discussions to occur, bringing a standard to different topic areas or device areas or requirements that countries may have for a medical device.
My understanding has always been that even U.S. manufacturers will look to Europe or other countries outside the U.S. to accelerate the approval of their discoveries and to even launch those technologies in other parts of the world versus the U.S. The FDA's got to want to see that get better, right? I mean, I would assume.
Definitely. I think the FDA is working to encourage those studies that would normally take place overseas to bring them here to the U.S. I mean, when you have that happen, even though they may be investigational devices, U.S. patients are getting a crack at those first. That's a great opportunity, great milestone for us to focus on.
You know, we've been hearing a lot about clinical trials. Just to pivot here for a second, and I know someone. I just talked to someone who participated and enrolled in a clinical trial for I think the AstraZeneca. Is that right? AstraZeneca vaccine. How does the FDA go about safeguarding these clinical trials?
Sure. For medical devices in particular, one initiates what's called an investigational device exemption, also known as an IDE, to initiate a clinical study. FDA safeguards these studies by ensuring patients who participate in these studies are afforded the maximum amount of protections. If the studies are not safe, these studies don't get started until they're modified to ensure the protection to the patient. And then once those studies are stood up, that's the basis for getting the information needed to make a decision whether or not that device is ready for the marketplace.
Has there ever been a situation where a clinical trial really has gone bad, where it's had,
the majority of studies that come to the agency, sponsors, principal investigators, they're really trying to work towards getting what they believe a good product to the patient. Sometimes that approach, that idea might need a little bit of a modification. But in my experience, people have they're working for a good purpose, and usually that comes out in the studies.
You might not be able to answer this question, but like when I hear about the efficacy of the J&J vaccine being around 69, 70%, but it says it's 100% when preventing death from COVID-19. How do they come to that conclusion? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, if you don't know the answer, it's fine. But I heard that today as the vaccine's rolling out, and I'm just wondering how they can make a claim like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of investment in the vaccine development. We're talking about thousands of patient participants in those studies, different phases of development where they can evaluate both the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines. And I would encourage that if folks are interested about a particular vaccine from one company or another, most of those vaccines have gone to a what's known as a public advisory committee meeting, and there the data is presented to the public. So it's a really good opportunity for all of us to get a little bit more familiar with how those the evidence sets for which those vaccines have been reviewed at the agency for emergency use authorization.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'm going to pivot here for a moment. We've got a great med tech entrepreneur community right here in Buffalo, New York. I think you're probably learning that in the short time that you've been here. I know where your priorities lie, but how might some Western New York startups benefit from your FDA expertise?
Sure. I'm hoping that the startups Western New York can work with our institute, our new Office of Regulatory Services, and getting medical devices to the U.S. marketplace in an early feasibility type program, paradigm, helping bring in innovators and developers to connect with the right folks at the agency so their ideas and technologies reach patient. This would be a great benchmark for work by this office here in Buffalo.
Fantastic. Okay, as you know, and as our listeners know, we like to close each episode with some rapid-fire questions to give our listeners the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So I hope that you're not prepared for these, but I'm going to go ahead and fire away anyway. So what was the most interesting thing you saw working at the White House?
I think one of the
Doesn't have to be medical device related, by the way. It could be, someone tried to take you hostage or, anything.
The movie stuff didn't happen down there for me. But, in my position, I was reminded of the dedication of federal workers across the U.S. government, especially trying to convene the activities and the efforts of multiple agencies for collaboration and communication. I think folks can rest assured of the dedicated staff of our federal workers that work for each of us every day.
What person or things inspire you?
I come from a close-knit family, born and raised in New York. I'd like to say my parents, they never cease to amaze me. They inspire me every day. They remind me how precious life is. So make sure you give your mom or dad or both a call if you can today, if possible.
Amen to that, my friend. Amen to that. What's your favorite food?
I heard, I do love a good sandwich. I heard that there's a beef on weck to try here in Buffalo.
Do you have a favorite Buffalo food yet?
What was that?
Do you have a favorite Buffalo food yet?
I don't have one yet, but I'm hoping to start a menu there.
Okay. I'm not going to assure you that all of them are good for you, but they sure do taste good. After the pandemic, what's something in Buffalo you can't wait to do?
Yeah, I can't wait to explore the downtown Buffalo. I love the city, being born and raised in New York City. So I'm looking to explore more of the downtown area as we all hope to get back to normal post-COVID.
Carlos, we've covered a lot today, and we look forward to working with you and our strategic partners in the community to leverage your expertise and continue to expand Western New York's reputation as a medical innovation hub. Thanks for joining us today, and our listeners, thank you for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to be the first to know when there is a new episode, make sure to subscribe and recommend to a family member, friend, colleague, or your social media followers.